I dreaded renewing my long-term visit pass here in Singapore for weeks. I braced myself for the worst morning of the year, and what actually happened flipped the whole day around in a way I never saw coming. But before I get into all of it, do me one quick favor, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. It genuinely helps us out over here, and it keeps these porch stories coming your way. Now, let me tell you what I was picturing when I woke up that Tuesday. A numbered ticket pulled from one of those little dispensers, a hard plastic chair that goes cold under you after 20 minutes, 3 forms filled out wrong in blue ink where they wanted black, and some official behind the glass shaking his head slowly, sliding my papers back across the counter without a word. That was the morning living in my head. And if the word paperwork makes your stomach tighten just a little, then you already know exactly the morning I was picturing. Here's the thing that should embarrass me. I'm Bennett, I'm 68, and I've been living here in Singapore for 10 years now. 10 years. Long enough to know the hawker centers by name, long enough to ride the MRT half asleep and still get off at the right stop. And yet there I was, a grown man of 68, dreading an afternoon at a government office like it was a trip to the dentist. Where does a fear like that even come from? I'll tell you. It comes from back home because I remember the DMV. I remember whole afternoons of my life just gone, swallowed up under those flat fluorescent lights that hum. You'd stand in one line for 40 minutes, get to the front and hear, "Oh no, sir, that's the wrong line. You want window 6. So you'd cross the room and start again. And more than once, I stood there watching the clock crawl toward 4, watching the little window slide shut right in front of me. Come back tomorrow. That feeling never really left me. I carried it across the ocean, and 10 years later, it was still sitting in my chest. So you've probably wondered it yourself. After 10 years in a country, shouldn't a thing like this be easy? I honestly didn't know. That was the whole question knocking around in my head. And I'll be straight with you, I wasn't sure, but let me give you something useful right here, because I wish someone had told me sooner. You can book your appointment at the ICA building online a week ahead and just walk in at your slot. I didn't used to know that. And when it comes down to it, only 4 things actually matter for a renewal like mine, just 4. The rest of what I hauled downtown was pure nerves. And that right there is a little something I want to talk to you about. See, after 10 years here, I've watched a lot of newcomers do exactly what I did that Tuesday. Pack a folder 3 inches thick, sweat through their shirt, and lose a whole morning to it when the actual list was short. That's why I sat down and wrote out every single form, every step, and the retiree filing help in a practical ebook I put together over in the One Way Club. It's called One Way Guide. Now, it won't get on the plane and move you here for you, and honestly, it's not for the folks who already know the ropes. But if you're still guessing, still lying awake, wondering which papers you'll need, it saves you the exact folder I dragged downtown. You can scan the code on the screen or the links down in the description. That's all I'll say about it. So back to that Tuesday morning, I got up earlier than I needed to, which tells you everything about the state I was in. And I built myself that folder. Oh, that folder stuffed fat with photocopies of everything I could think of. My passport pages copied twice. The long-term visit pass through family sponsorship. That's the route I'm on, staying here long-term through family. And I had the sponsor letter stapled and copied again. My rental agreement from our flat over in Toa tucked in there too. Bank statements I was pretty sure nobody would ask for. The thing bulged. I could barely get the flap closed. And the whole time I was packing it, I had that knot. You know the one. Right in the pit of the stomach, that tight little fist that shows up before anything has even gone wrong. I told myself, Bennett, you are being ridiculous. And the knot didn't listen. It never does. I clutched that folder to my chest and headed out, down the elevator, out from under the void deck of our HDB block where the morning was already thick and warm, onto the MRT, heading downtown. And there's a strange calm on those trains. If you've never ridden one, cool, quiet, gliding along. At one stretch, the track runs up high and the city slides past right at eye level, the blocks and the green and the glass all drifting by. Normally, I love that ride. That morning, I barely saw it. I just sat there with the folder in my lap and the knot in my gut, turning the same question over and over. Was 10 years going to make this easy? Or was I about to walk in there and relearn the whole thing the hard way, like the last decade counted for nothing? I didn't have an answer. I just had a fat folder and a bad feeling. The train pulled in I came up the stairs into the heat, and there it was, the ICA building, tall and glassy in the morning sun, the place where it would either go smooth or go sideways. I stood on the pavement a second longer than I needed to, took a breath, and went in. Inside it was cool and bright and busy, exactly the kind of room I'd been dreading. I found the counter for my appointment, and when my turn came, I stepped up, and I set that whole bulging stack of paper down in front of the officer with a little thud, both hands, the full mountain of it. And I braced myself, braced for her to start pulling it apart page by page, finding everything I'd gotten wrong. The sponsor letter, my whole stack of copies of it, 3 of them, slid right back across the desk toward me. Then the extra printouts. Then the second copy of the rental agreement I'd been so proud to have. Priya kept sliding paper back, calm as anything, her reading glasses still pushed up on her head, and my careful little mountain got smaller and smaller in front of my eyes. I just stood there. I'd carried that folder against my chest all the way downtown like it was a newborn. And this young woman was gently taking it apart, sheet by sheet, with the faintest smile, like she'd seen 100 nervous uncles do the exact same thing that same week. "Uncle," she said again, tapping the little pile she'd kept, "this is all we need." And here's the thing that made my shoulders finally drop. Guess how many of my papers she actually kept? 4. That's it. 4 things off the whole bulging stack. The renewal form, my passport, 1 photo, and the fee. That was it. That was the monster I'd built up in my head for 3 weeks. The form I'd filled out at the kitchen table in Toapeo the night before, my passport that lives in the drawer by the door, 1 passport photo, and the money to pay. Everything else, the photocopies, the backup copies of the backup copies, the letter I'd asked my family to sign twice just in case none of it needed to leave the folder. I want to be honest with you about something because it surprised me too. 10 years in this country hadn't taught me this. A decade of living here, and I still walked in expecting the worst. What actually made it simple wasn't my experience at all. It was one small thing I'd done the week before without thinking much of it. I'd booked the appointment online, picked a time, picked a day, got a slot, no numbered ticket pulled from a machine, no cattle line out the door. I honestly didn't used to know you could even do that. Book your slot, show up at your time, and half the misery is gone before you ever walk through the door. So the pile shrinks to 4 things, and I'm standing there feeling foolish and relieved all at once. But I promised you I'd never sugarcoat this stuff, so let me stop and be square with you. I'll be straight with you about the one thing that isn't rosy here. The fee is real, it's money, actual money, and it comes out of your pocket that afternoon, whether you remembered it was coming or not. Nobody waves you through. For the long-term visit pass renewal through family sponsorship, you're looking at a few hundred Singapore dollars, call it around 150 US dollars when you do the math in your head. It's not nothing, and here's where it stings if it's going to sting. It stings when you forget it's coming. If you walk in picturing a stamp and a handshake and suddenly there's a card terminal turned towards you, that little jolt is real. So don't let it be a surprise. Set the money aside the same week you book the slot, and it stops being a shock and turns into just another line on the afternoon. Let me read it to you plain, the way I read my own bank statement. At the end of the month, a few hundred Singapore dollars, roughly 150 of our dollars. That's less than I used to hand the DMV in fees and lost wages for one wasted morning back home, and I got a whole clean pass out of it, good for the next stretch of my life here. When I put it that way, sitting at my own kitchen table doing the sums, it stopped looking like a wall and started looking like a bargain. And that's really the whole flip of the thing, isn't it? Same errand. Renew a piece of paper that lets a man stay where he's built his life. Back in the States, that errand ate whole afternoons, the wrong line, the closed window, the fluorescent hum. Here, Priya slid my photo under the little scanner, glanced at the form, tapped a few keys, and never once shook her head at me. Same job, opposite feeling. That's all I'll say about the comparison, because I don't want to dwell on the gray days back home. I'd rather tell you about the good ones here. She checked the photo against my face, pushed those glasses down onto her nose for a second to read something on her screen, then pushed them right back up. She stamped the form, slid the card terminal my way for the fee, and I paid it, and it was done in the time it takes to tell you about it. "Okay, uncle," she said, handing my passport back. "Take a seat over there. We'll call your number." And she pointed to a row of chairs along the wall with one of those digital number displays glowing above them, the kind that ticks over one soul at a time. Now, here's where the knot came back. Because up to that counter, everything had gone easy. Too easy, my old head told me. The forms were fine, the fee was paid, Priya had been kind. But in my imagination, the trap was never at the counter. The trap was always after. The wait, the long stretch where you sit, and then a door opens and somebody calls your name with a frown and a single sheet of paper in their hand and says the words every one of us dreads, there's a problem with your application. That was the part I'd truly braced for. Not the queue, not the fee, the waiting. The hour or two in that hard plastic chair where, in my mind, some form always comes back wrong, some box left unchecked, some copy they suddenly do need after all the one I'd handed back. That's the stretch where the whole clean day quietly unravels. I'd lived that a dozen times back home, the 4 o'clock window that closes just as they call the number ahead of yours. So I sat down in that waiting area, my thin little pile of 4 things resting on my knee, the folder now almost empty against my side. I watched the number display tick up. I felt that familiar tightening in my stomach, the same knot I'd ridden the MRT downtown with that morning, back again right on schedule. So I sat down in that waiting area, number in hand, bracing for the long stretch, the hour or two where, in my head, some form always comes back wrong and the whole day unravels. That was the part I'd truly dreaded, and that is exactly where the day did the thing I never saw coming. That long stretch I was bracing for, the hour or two where the form comes back wrong and the whole day quietly falls apart, it never came. Priya, with those reading glasses still pushed up on her head, called my number back in about 25 minutes. 25. I was still settling into that hard plastic chair, still holding the knot in my stomach like it had somewhere to be. I almost didn't believe her. I stood up, walked over, and she slid the approval across the counter like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. To her, it was. The long-term visit pass, renewed, stamped, done. My whole body had been braced for a fight that simply wasn't there. 25 minutes. After weeks of dread, that was the whole thing. Let that sit for a second, because I want you to feel the size of the gap. For weeks, I had pictured a lost day. The DMV, back home, the fluorescent lights, the wrong line, the closed window at 4 o'clock. I had packed a folder thick with photocopies to fight a war. And the war lasted less time than it takes me to finish a cup of coffee. I walked out of that building and the doors slid open, and there it was, the wall of humidity at 4 o'clock. Singapore in the late afternoon, thick and warm, the kind of air that wraps right around you the moment you leave the cool of the lobby. Any other day, that heat might feel like a lot. That day, it felt like a reward. I stood on the step for a moment, the approved pass in my shirt pocket, and I realized something almost funny. I had my whole afternoon back, half my day still ahead of me. I'd cleared the morning for a battle, and instead I was standing on the sidewalk downtown with nothing left to dread and hours to spend. So here's the twist, plain as I can say it. The renewal I built into a monster, the thing I lost sleep over, the thing that put that knot in my stomach on the MRT ride down, turned into the easiest afternoon I'd had all year. Not a hard afternoon that went okay. The easiest one. Easier than a trip to the grocery store, if I'm honest, because at least there I have to decide between 2 kinds of rice. And I knew exactly how I wanted to spend the hours I'd just gotten back. There's a hawker center near our flat in Toa, the kind of place I could walk to with my eyes closed by now. I went straight there, sat down at a metal table with a plate of chicken rice and a copio in a thick white cup, that strong black coffee they pour so well here, steam still coming off it around me. The sound I know better than almost any sound in this city, the clatter of the tray return, plates and trays stacking, somebody's chair scraping, 2 uncles at the next table arguing happily about football. That everyday music, that's the sound of home 10 years in. And I sat there with the rice and the coffee, and I laughed at myself a little, because I had spent weeks feeding a fear that had nothing underneath it. The monster I'd built it was made of nothing. Old memories from a different country, dressed up and pointed at the wrong day. Now, I told you at the start I'd be straight with you, so let me be straight about the one thing that isn't free. There is a fee, a few hundred Singapore dollars for the renewal, and if you forget it's coming, it does sting a little on the day. That part is real. I'm not going to pretend the whole thing cost you nothing, but sitting there with my copio, I did the math the way you do when a worry finally lets go of you. A few $100s once against a whole quiet afternoon handed back to me, and years of being able to stay in the country I love, near my neighbors, near this exact table. Put next to that, the fee is the smallest part of the whole story. It's the price of the ticket, and the ticket is worth it. 10 years I've been here now. And I'll tell you what still gets me, even after all this time. Singapore keeps surprising me by being gentler than I feared. Every big thing I've braced for out here, the housing, the doctor, the paperwork, has turned out smaller and kinder than the version I'd built in my head the night before. The dread is always bigger than the thing. Always. So let me hand you the whole afternoon the way I wish somebody had handed it to me, because it really does come down to just a few things. Book the appointment online the week before. I didn't used to know you could do that, and it changes everything you walk in with a time, not a numbered ticket, and a prayer. Bring the 4 things that actually matter. Not a folder like mine, the form, your passport, 1 photo, and the fee. That's it. Priya handed half my stack right back to me. The rest of it, all those photocopies, I lost an evening making dead weight. Set aside the fee ahead of time so it isn't a surprise on the day. A few $100s ready in your pocket, and the sting never happens. And then give yourself 1 calm afternoon. That's the real secret. Not a whole day off, not a week of worry, 1 afternoon. Because that is genuinely all this takes. Book it, bring the 4, set aside the fee, show up. That's the arithmetic. And on the far side of it, there's a plate of chicken rice with your name on it if you want to celebrate the way I did. I think about the version of me who rode the MRT downtown that Tuesday morning with his stomach in a knot, clutching that ridiculous folder like it was going to save him. I'd tell him to relax. I'd tell him he was about to get his whole afternoon back and spend the rest of it laughing at how easy it was. So let me say this to you directly, because I think some of you needed to hear it today. If a stack of forms is the one thing standing between you and this, between you and the warm evenings, the neighbors, the coffee that costs $1 and tastes like a memory, hear me. It's smaller than you think, much smaller. The paperwork is not the mountain. The paperwork is 1 calm afternoon, and then it's done, and then you're just living here. That's the part the dread never lets you see. It shows you the DMV, the closed window, the wrong line. It never shows you the 25 minutes and the copio afterward, but that's the true picture. I've lived it now 10 years running. This dream, the one you've been turning over quietly, the one that feels almost too big to reach for it, is so much more doable than the dread ever lets you believe. The numbers within reach. The forms are 4, the afternoon is yours. And on the other side of it, there's a table at a hawker center, the clatter of the trays, and a life that keeps turning out gentler than you feared. Go book the appointment. I'll save you a seat.